There's a huge problem with Jayce. If I were to ask you who are our two main protagonists in Arcane, you would say Vi and Jayce. That bit is pretty much clear throughout the first act, with dedicated episodes with Vi in the first and Jayce in the second, with the culmination of their character arcs in episode 3. But after the time skip, Vi remains as the main driving force of the narrative, while Jayce is important only on paper and not individually. Jayce completely loses his agency after the time skip as a shell of his former complexity. But what if I were to tell you that's what made his character amazing? What if he was always like this from the start? And what if this sets up amazing revelations for his personal growth? Well, stay tuned because this video will make you appreciate the boy of tomorrow. Jayce has a lot of haters, arguably the most hated character in Arcane, other than, Marcus. Overflowing privilege aside, a big complaint for him is how he's stupid and keeps doing dumb shit. As a counselor, it seems like he just listens to the last person he spoke with and then 180s as the next one comes along. Heimerdinger tells him not to show the Hex Gem, Vi tells him to fight, Mel tells him to get corrupt, and Nabessa tells him to make weapons. But that habit was still present in the first act, when his story was arguably at its most enjoyable. First, Jayce started with one goal, which defined his life's work. Jayce was rescued by a mage, which inspired him to replicate his sorcery with technology. This was Jayce's sole bit of individuality, pushing against society and his mentors to further his dreams. But once the council clamps down on his ass and tells him not to do it and his patrons give up on him, he loses all will to live and is about to give up immediately. Kind of a bad look. But this is what I want to talk about with Jayce. At every moment of his life, he is always anchored between two options and tunnel visions onto the line he's walking. Very binary in nature. After the council tells him no and talking to his mom, Jayce is left with two options: live quietly in Piltover in his hammer business or continue pursuing Hex Tech. Jayce doesn't entertain the former option and marches straight to the Kiramans for help until he gets rejection. Smothered of both his options, Jayce sees no point in living and decides to jump. Then Victor comes and re-inspires Jayce and opens up the choice for his dream. Encouraged by Mel Medarda, he continues with his path and discovers Hextech by a stroke of luck. Act 1 Jayce was the purest form of Jayce, as throughout everything he is tethered by his dream of creating magic. He talks Mel into supporting his escapades, he rejects his mom on living a normal life. Jayce was truly himself in these two episodes and completed everything he wanted to accomplish in his life the way he wanted to throughout everything. It wasn't the council that made him give up on his dream, that was himself. It wasn't Victor that made him create Hextech, that was also Jayce. Post-timeskip, Jayce reveled in his invention and became the face of Piltover and the Academy as the council sponsored his research to build the Hexgate. Then after that, under Victor's influence to do good, he invented some machines to help the working populace while Heimerdinger told him to hold off his showcasing. Right before the Progress Day speech, he meets with Mel, who tells him about her hopes for what's new, what Jayce will bring to Piltover. Here, Jayce is faced with his second choice: listen to his mentor and play it safe by hiding his creations but letting down Victor and Mel, or embrace his entrepreneurial spirit and ego by giving a show but disappointing Heimerdinger. Even though Jayce treasures his kinship with Victor and wants to get closer to Mel, Heimerdinger's ethos brings smothering pressure onto Jayce, who, under the stress of possibly getting banished again and losing everything, plays it safe for himself and hides his invention. These are when the cracks begin showing, as this choice doesn't give Jayce any agency at all. He is basically completely under the whim of Heimerdinger. How is he supposed to not show his inventions in a Jayce way? He can't, smothered in action. This is in stark contrast to how Jayce's personality shines when he manages to establish Hextech. But this is the first of Jayce merely picking a side instead of defining his decisions and actions according to his will. After Jinx's attack, he gets thrusted into the council through Mel manipulating the council and Heimerdinger's acknowledgement of the necessity to protect Hextech. I'll cut Jayce some slack here, as he made a speech about protecting Hextech by closing down the Hex Gates, but that ideal of his of Hextech security kind of rings hollow compared to his Act 1 Hextech dream. But anywho, Jayce becomes the counselor in charge of Hextech security, and that title alone forces him down the life of public service. Honestly, I'd like to cut Jayce some slack since he already fulfilled his life's purpose. It makes sense why he just attaches himself to whatever comes close. As counselor, he is extremely devoted to his position. Right off the bat, he begins digging into the Enforcer records and commanding Marcus around, even when Victor complains about Jayce's abandonment of Hextech. But as counselor, Jayce can deal with more pressing matters, as his political actions can provide immediate good by stopping Jinx instead of the long-term good Hextech can bring. The thing is, Jayce doesn't really know how to be counselor, so Mel steps in and pushes him towards corruption. Now, Mel is a groomer, there's no way around it. And it should have been me who's getting groomed, not Jayce, but Mel saw incredible potential in Hextech and sees incredible potential in Jayce. Unraveling her true intentions, we know Mel came to Piltover because of her pacifist ideals, while also in her flashback she talks about setting up a figurehead to dictate social stability. That's basically what Mel's trying to set up here. She has a specific vision for Piltover to become a utopia and wants Jayce as the figurehead that she can influence to achieve her dream and resolve her underlying mommy issues. And to that, she's trying to help Jayce amass as much power and influence as possible. Later, he and heimerdinger butt heads when talking about the Hex Core, and it comes down to Jayce's next choice, choosing between Victor and heimerdinger. But at this point, Jayce is disillusioned to the real world and heimerdinger's influence. Alongside past reservations, he chooses to oust heimerdinger. This gives Victor the freedom to continue experimenting with the Hex Core and helps consolidate his own power to help Piltover in accordance to his vision. Even Mel didn't want heimerdinger gone at that moment initially, but she went along with Jayce here. Subsequently, Jayce supplants heimerdinger as the head of the council as he struggles with the responsibility of managing the entire Piltover, throughout worsening tensions instead of focusing on Hextech security. This puts immediate stress on him as he already talked about his dislike of politics and hides away from his duties, but Mel reinforces his power to shape Piltover. But the politics brain Jayce meets up with an arrested Victor as he lashes out against the Zonites, causing a majority of his problems, which offends Victor naturally. Jayce next gets torn between Victor and Mel as Mel tries to convince Jayce about the necessity of creating weapons. Quite a literal metaphor with Jayce literally in between the two, but again, Jayce is forced to think. After seeing the corpses of the enforcers scattered across the bridge and hearing the dangers of blind trust from Mbessa, Jayce grows restless with sitting around doing nothing, with the council refusing to act with even Mel advocating for peace. It's no wonder why Jayce hears Vi out with a way to stop war, especially after hearing about the state of the Undercity from Caitlyn. The cards for war and militarism with Mel, Mbessa, and Vi stacked against just Victor for peace, he takes Vi's deal to hit Silco where it hurts. This results in Jayce accidentally killing a kid, which makes him realize that what he's doing isn't creating any good from his perspective. I do think Vi's point is correct that the wrongdoings and war crimes are kind of necessary if you want to prevent an all-out war, but once again Jayce sees that violent action is not the solution and gravitates back to Mel, back to Victor as he brokers peace as one last gambit. As an engineer and member of Piltover society, Jayce understood his field and world and was able to maneuver it single-handedly. But on the big stage of politics, way out of his comfort zone, Jayce is burdened to walk along the tightrope of choice. Jayce listens to others because he doesn't know what he's doing as his peers try to guide him towards north or south. Not even wanting the position in the first place, Jayce doesn't have a specific goal of what he wants to do in his position other than doing good. Pretty vague. So if this person says kill people to do good and someone else says get killed to do good, Jayce is forced to pick along one of these paths. The tug of war between influences on him serves to set up the character arc for Jayce throughout Arcane. Arcane doesn't really start until Act 1, after the prologue. I think it's safe to say Jayce is destined to be leader of Piltover, and thus it makes sense for the beginnings of Jayce's rise into true leadership to be stuck in a custody battle with zero initiative. But slowly and slowly, as Jayce gets more comfortable in his position and understands the weight of his decisions, Jayce gets more and more capable. First, the taste of politics and societal impact, choosing between secure progress or rapid innovation. His first decision in policy. Then, the birth of motivated action over social stagnation by prioritizing Victor and Mel over heimerdinger. After that, he's faced with the decision of preparing for war, prioritizing between policy, defense, or offense. People hate on Jayce because he flip-flops between sides. The cruelty of politics is because end results are messy. Don't like getting taken advantage of? Build weapons. Don't like killing children? Get attacked. Like a scientist, Jayce experiments with each of the choices laid out to him and faces the faults firsthand before weighing his options. Listening to heimerdinger the first time didn't really give him much, so next time, screw you. Similarly, defensively diffusing Zon and treaties didn't go so well, so prepare for war. I do want to note that Jayce does develop his agency at the end of each act. It was Jayce who, once becoming familiar with the inner cogs of politics, initiated the vote to retire heimerdinger. Then, to the entire council's shock again, Jayce presented a peace deal with Zon's independence. Sure, you could say taking power was Mel's idea and peace was always Victor's, but the important part is Jayce spearheading and rushing these developments and strong-arming the entire council to do so. Those instances are where Jayce becomes a true leader, first by subtly waving his Hextech power over the upper houses to vote heimerdinger out, and then by directly cussing out the entire council and taking full backlash before telling them to shut the fuck up and get their shit together, convincing them all to let Zon get independent. The part about Jayce I've been harping about all this time is Jayce completely losing himself come Season 2. If the result of Jayce slowly taking initiative is the biggest disaster that ever happened to Piltover, I think that would tell him that on the decision line from complete subservience to independent action, Jayce will internalize his failure along that path Mel sent him towards. Yes, Mel wants him to be a figurehead, but she wanted Jayce to become capable in and of itself. She doesn't get mad at him when he does unexpected things like getting rid of Heimerdinger or making weapons. She lashes out at Mbessa for ruining her pet project while comforting Jayce about his political stand. Mel yearns for Jayce's capability to stand proud, letting him go sway the other counselors during the opera. I also want to note how the opera has the symbol of the Medarda upper house, indicating that Mel owns this building. It's symbolic of how Mel is directing the stage for which Jayce will play the main actor, reaching a political crescendo just as the music hits its own. But Mel has always encouraged Jayce's self-initiative, with Mel and her mother at opposite ends before, alongside the fact that Mel will be incapacitated in one way or another with Mbessa in prime position to take control of the council. I doubt Mbessa would want to butt heads with Jayce. But gaslighting is what she does best, blaming his decisions driving Piltover to the brink. And luckily for Jayce, there's a leader that can fix this, experienced in war, so Jayce can just keep his head down. All he needs to do is churn out Hextech weaponry to fuel the war effort. How does that sound? Yes, I know the leaks came out, but this prediction was located in my previous videos in the info cards above. This would work in line for Mbessa's motivations, as she already took advantage of Jayce's mental state before, and we know she came to Piltover for Hextech weaponry. But as Season 2 trudges along and Jayce becomes disillusioned with Mbessa's wartime direction, Jayce will fully blossom and take charge of Piltover by breaking free of his one-dimensional world and paving a choice he makes for himself. In a society turned upside down, drowning in battle, in hate, violence, and retribution, Jayce will once again stand against the grain, much like he did with Hextech, and reclaim all his willpower to shift societal standards and usher in the needed period of peacetime and progress. Dethroning Mbessa, reconciling with Zaun, and rebuilding Piltover with his renewed identity, experience, and leadership, Jayce turns Piltover, truly, into the city of tomorrow.